Our next speaker is also somebody I know very well. His name's John Ainsworth. Cliff Munsey came to me one time. He said, you got to listen to John speak. And I did, and I was impressed. You got to be careful because he's an extremely intelligent fellow. I was born in the backwoods, Stokes County. It took me a little while to catch on, but he's very smart, very articulate, and he's got a lot of good things to say. John's years of research into America's derailment have tightly honed his work around the political motivations and outcome of the Reconstruction Acts, which followed the Civil War. John founded America's Remedy in 2010, which is an educational think tank. Please put your hands together for John, and you're going to love what this man has to say. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank everyone. How many people are familiar with America's Remedy? Know anything about us? Seen some videos, anything? Got a couple people out there. What we are is an education think tank. We're education. I've been involved in this movement, just to give you an idea. I attended my first Patriot meeting in 1990. I've been involved in this movement for 29 years. Back in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s, I'm seeing what you guys saw. America's going down the tubes. I started getting involved in what we consider Patriot groups, and that's a loose-knit name. Patriot groups are nothing more than people who are dissatisfied with what's going on and are trying to find a solution. There is only one solution, and that's the truth. And the truth is many things, but it's fundamentally one thing. Jesus Christ is the truth. The Bible is the word of truth. Its words are true. God is the one true God. And when right before Jesus left this time of year that we're celebrating in Easter season, he sent a helper. And that helper he called the Holy Spirit. And he labeled it. He said it's the Spirit of truth. Truth that'll lead you to all truths. What got me on my journey was trying to figure out what was true, because I felt confused. How many people here feel confused about the state of affairs in the United States? You look at the Constitution, you look at what they're doing, nothing's meshing. Is anybody here confused about how we got here? I was. I might be the only one. How many people believe the United States Congress is an honorable and honest entity? But you know what? We're taught there's one period of time in our history when Congress was an honorable entity. From 1860, 61 to 1868. And they did good things. They changed us in a good way. I'm here to say that Congress was no different than the Congress we have now. A Congress that wants to usurp power, wants to do silent coups like they're trying to do to the President of the United States, overthrow it. We have to go back to the American Civil War and cease looking at it from what they want to teach us to look at it as a moral perspective. We got to look at it from a political perspective. Now, I've got 29 years of experience in here. I'll tell you how I got started. I went to meetings after several years. I got involved in meetings, and it's kind of strange. The guy was holding meetings just every other Tuesday. And I couldn't get him to change. And it just started January 1st, and by the end of the middle of the year, if you missed a couple, I didn't know what day to show up. And so I just proposed that I would take the other Tuesday so that people could come. And I started an education group of, let's just grab all these Patriot documents that I get and see, let's read them, rather than people putting them in my lap and saying, this is what this means. And I started reading. Every week we read these Patriot documents that we're getting at all these meetings. And with time, I started finding out most of them were lies. They were not true. The Lord tells us what? Do not be deceived. Watch out for wolves in sheep's clothing. We've got to watch out at what we're being taught. One of the most important things I learned from those Patriot meetings was to throw away most of everything I was taught in those Patriot meetings. I don't know. Look at us. We're a fractured people. We all have our own different issues. We don't know what the problem was. There was a guy by the name of Philip Freneau who wrote an article in the National Gazette. He was Thomas Jefferson's editor for his newspaper. And he wrote an article in the 1790s of what it would take to destroy this country. He listed a bunch of things. But at the end, he said, this is all sufficient to destroy this new republic we've established. But, and we could list many more, but if you can get the people so confused, they don't know where the truth lies, they will withdraw their attention from the contest. And that's where we are today. We have a lot of people that are so confused. I'm just tired of listening to it. And what we at America's Remedy are about is we're here to educate you. We want to get this community on a laser focus towards the truth. How many people here are here to seek the truth and find out what it takes to get this country back? How many people see that we're going in a direction, and if we keep riding this train, it's going to be to our destruction? One of our phrases we have in America's Remedy is we have revolution, restoration, or stay the course. We can either have a revolution. These are only three options. Revolution, something new. Let's go shoot guns and just change it. Well, you better have a darn good political backing of George Soros or something to do that. I see zero chance of that happening. You have revolution. You have restoration. Why don't we restore what was taken from us, what our founders put into place, that solid foundation our founders put out there? Or you can have stay the course. Let's look at this system that's in place today. Let's just keep on riding it out and see where it's going to go. How many people here know what direction we're going in? I mean, look at... I look at Christians, and I read newspapers of Christian bakers and any Christian that does this, and Christians are bigots, and Christians are intolerant, and Christians are the problem. It's in the newspapers. It's being implemented. Anything Christian has to be removed from anywhere. Children can't see the Ten Commandments. If it were 1930 Germany, and the exact same thing was going on there for Christians instead of Jews, I'm getting all this stuff in the newspapers. I'm getting this thing where it's politically correct to hit them and abuse them and, sue them and try to destroy their lives. I'd want to wonder at what point would I say, I'm a target. It's time to leave. Because how many of us look at the Jews and say, how did they get there? Didn't they see it coming? Do you see it coming? Or we're going to sit on our hands? Or are we going to get the education it takes to get this country back? When our nation was founded, we were a Christian nation. We had Christian states. These are original state constitutions. We have this on our table back there. Constitution of North Carolina, 1776. No person who shall deny the being of God or the truth of the Protestant religion or the divine authority of either the Old or New Testaments shall be capable of holding office or place of trust or profit in the civil department of the state. You had to be a Christian to hold office. Not to be a member of the body politic, but to hold office, because that way we knew that's where you put your hand on the Bible, you swore an oath to God, you were going to protect the Constitution and guarantee and protect the rights of the people. Do people have to put their hand on the Bible anymore? Can it be a Quran? Can it be nothing? Yes, it's changed. What's changed? These are just several more. I'm not going to go through them. Well, I will do South Carolina. South Carolina Constitution of 1776. That all persons and religious societies who acknowledge that there is one God and a future state of rewards and punishment, and that God is publicly to be worshipped, shall be freely tolerated. The Christian Protestant religion shall be deemed and is hereby constituted and declared to be the established religion of the state. Can we have that today? This is what our founders put into place. What we want to look at is what displaced that. Let's go back to the Civil War. How many people know what the object of the American Civil War was? Was it to get rid of slavery? How do we know that? Do we just feel it? Or do we have historical facts to prove it? We've got a void here if we don't know why we say something. The object of the war, passed in Congress, said the war was not prosecuted in any spirit of conquest or to overthrow or interfere with the established institutions of the states. That was slavery. The object of the Civil War was not to interfere with the institution of slavery. How many of you were taught that? The war was not for slavery. Is there any other evidence we've got? How many people were taught that 30% of the slave states fought for the North? Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, Missouri, and then West Virginia came in. Are we seeing a conflict here of what we're taught versus what we know and believe and think? We're destroyed for lack of knowledge. Whose duty is it to get the knowledge it takes to get your freedom? Is it mine? Is it your representatives? Is it the school system? It's you as an individual. That's what we offer back here at America's Remedy. We're the very back left booth back there. We give education. We do seminars. I do talks. I've done talks in New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee. We try to educate people of what it takes. Well, let me tell you, because I'm going to give you the short version of what happened in this country. The war was declared in 1861. Got a question. Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution says what? Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against the United States or giving aid and comfort to their enemies. And it uses the word them in there, the states. Treason consists only in levying war against the states. Did the southern states wage war? Or they defend themselves against an aggressor? The American Civil War was an illegal, unconscionable criminal act designed to get rid of states' rights. Which, while we're here, we say, hey, we have states' rights. Well, obviously you didn't see who won the war. How many people draw a line in the sand and say, if at this point I'm going to stand, they cannot cross it? Well, I won't do the analogy outside the microphones. 1963, a line was drawn in the sand. It says, you shall not take prayer out of school. Supreme Court ruled, yeah. Murray versus Curlett was a court case. Abington versus Shemp, two ways to call it. Took prayer out of school. What did the people do? Complained about it. Now, why did they take it out of school? They took it out of school, prayer out of school, because of a violation of the 14th Amendment. 1973, Roe versus Wade said that all people should have abortions if they want, all women should have abortions if they want them. Is that your line in the sand? Well, I just got finished erasing the line in the sand for prayer in school. Well, now I got 1973. I'm going to stand here. We're not going to let them do this to us. It's immoral. And they did it. What'd you do? We erased that line in the sand. 1980, Stone versus Graham said you cannot display the 10 Commandments in any school or on any public building. Christian community, people stood up, line in the sand. You're not going to allow that. Well, they did it. Now they just complain about it. 2003, Lawrence versus Texas. It said sodomy, you could have no law against sodomy. It made homosexuality legal. People stood up against it. Crossed out that line in the stand, we took another back step. Got gay marriage. We have states doing gay marriage constitution amendments saying we're not going to allow it. What did the federal government say? Tough nuggies, man. You're going to get gay marriage. Did the people vote for that? Is that what we, the people, wanted? Okay, what happened? If you don't understand your history, you don't know why that happened. In 2017, they said if you don't use a proper pronoun for transgender people, you can get fined. In February of this year, in Canada, British Columbia, they passed a law. It was like a father not wanting his 8-year-old to go through transgender therapy. Tried to stop it. His mother was for it. Went to court. The court said the child was old enough to make his own decisions, even outside of his mother. He could go through hormone therapy. And it became a crime called family violence if the father ever mentioned his biological son to be a boy again. Could not use an improper pronoun against his son, and they took one step further. They said he couldn't even say it to a third party. He could never use an improper pronoun, even to a third party. This is what's coming, people. What's it going to take for Americans to stand up and say we've had enough? What are you leaving? If you're Christians, what are you leaving your children as an inheritance? What are you saying? Well, I didn't know. Well, you've got the full opportunity to know. And we're looking for people who want to get this country back. We at Americans Remedy and the NC Republic are outside the box, even outside the box of this group. But we got outside the box after 20 years of research. We're asking people who are serious, who want this country back, to come back there. But I don't know. America's influenced by a bunch of snowflakes out there who you got to say 3 nice things to before you can even get the slightest bit of criticism. I'm looking for people who can take it on the chin and don't get offended. We've got to get to where, if you're afraid of being called a racist, a xenophobe, a homophobe, a transphobe, it just goes on. They've got us reduced to the capacity of a Pavlovian dog. Anybody know what a Pavlovian dog is? That's where they put food in front of it and it starts salivating, and they do it over and over again to where it just salivates anytime the bowl's put in front of it, and then they can put something else in front of it and it salivates. It's a conditioned response. Well, our conditioned response to political correctness is, oh, no, I'm not. I'm not a homophobe. I'm not, no. You don't have to be against people, but you can be for God. You can't have your beliefs and stand on them. But let me give a history lesson. The American Civil War was over in 1865 fundamentally. The war was fought under the principle that the southern states had never left the Union. Their ordinances of secession were a nullity. Now that's the position of the North, and we got to take their position because we said the ordinances of secession made us a free independent country or independent states to make our own choices. They said you're simply states in rebellion to lawful authority. You're rebel states. That's what they called them. So they never left the Union legally. Now I want everybody to put their legal hat on. Legally, they're not out of the Union. I've got to go backwards. I'm going to read a quote from Federalist Paper number 39. We have a lot of talk in this community about how we're set up as a federal union of sovereign states, of countries. You call your state a country or a state, united, and the federal government had certain enumerated powers. And that's our understanding. And that was the understanding of our founders. I'm going to read what James Madison wrote in Federalist Paper number 39, because I want you to look at this one concept. We were a federal union, and what's the difference between a federal union and a nation? Okay? Madison says this: the idea of a national government rather than a federal government, we see those terms as kind of interchangeable now, but they were very distinct back then. So he's going to say the idea of a national government involves in it not only an authority over the individual citizens, but an indefinite supremacy over all persons and things, so far as they are objects of lawful government. Among a people consolidated into one nation, this supremacy is completely vested in the national legislature. So Congress has complete control over the citizens if you have a national government. And he goes on, he says, in this relation then, the proposed government cannot be deemed a national one, since its jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only. Okay, and we see that we've talked about that here, right? Federal government is supposed to have certain enumerated objects. But what would change it? What would give Congress unlimited power over all people? If they could nationalize citizenship. Okay, right? According to James Madison, they knew that was coming. Well, if I'm a power grabber, what's the one thing I want to do if I want to consolidate all power in Washington? I want to nationalize citizenship, right? To nationalize citizenship, it not only gives the national government authority over individual citizens, but an indefinite supremacy over all persons. Do we see that happening in this country today? How many of y'all voted for Roe versus Wade, taking prayer out of school, taking down... Who dictated that? The national government. You need to learn your history of how this stuff, what's the legal aspect that puts this stuff in place. At the end of this American Civil War, April 1865, Southern states surrendered to overwhelming force, but they were still considered back in the American Union. To the degree that when Congress proposed the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, it sent it to the former Confederate states. And slavery, the 13th Amendment was ratified. North Carolina ratified it, I think, December 9th, 1865. So North Carolina was considered, Virginia was considered back in the Union as a member state on equal footing with the others in December of 1865. Evidenced by their participation in the passage of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. 1866, Congress proposes the 14th Amendment. How many people know what the 14th Amendment is supposed to do? Nationalize citizenship. What happens if they nationalize citizenship? They get complete control over all people. The 14th Amendment was rejected. Could not get the member states, not even all the northern states, bid into that one. So what did Congress do? In June of 1866, June 1866 they proposed the 14th Amendment, excuse me. June 1866 they proposed the 14th Amendment, sent it to the southern states. It was rejected by all the southern states with the exception of Tennessee. Tennessee was one of the southern states that did ratify it. And so what Congress did on March 2nd, 1867, is they did a coup. They destroyed the country by a legislative act. It's unconstitutional. It has no force in law legally. But what gives an unconstitutional act apparent validity? People participating in it. Saying, well, I don't care if it's unconstitutional. I'm going to recognize it as valid. That's the only thing that gives an unconstitutional act validity. The law doesn't do it. People's participation does. But Congress passed on March 2nd, 1867, the first of the Reconstruction Acts. What did the Reconstruction Acts do? They annulled every southern state that didn't ratify the 14th Amendment. It did not affect Tennessee. And they said those states had to create new constitutions. Oh, and by the way, all the people that participated in the war, you're not a part of the body politic anymore. You're not part of the body. You're not we the people anymore. Only people loyal to Washington are allowed to participate in this new Constitution. Is that what the Constitution of the United States says? We, the loyal to Washington? No. I'm going to read. Section 5 of the Reconstruction Acts of March 2nd, 1867. Well, actually, the very first sentence of the very first section says, whereas no lawful state governments now exist, that's a declaration. It wasn't, in fact, these states were participating in amending the Constitution. They were in full force. But in this act, they said, whereas no lawful state governments now exist. It was a lie. That's the Annulment Act. And it says, since they don't exist, now you have to have a new Constitution. Here's Section 5. And be it further enacted, that when the people of any one said rebel state shall have formed a constitution and government in conformity with the Constitution of the United States in all respects, and when said state, by a vote of its legislature, elected under said constitution, shall have adopted the amendment to the Constitution of the United States proposed by the 39th Congress and known as Article 14. So it says now you have to get a new Constitution and you have to bring up the 14th Amendment and not vote on whether you want it or not. You're required to pass it. And it goes on, known as Article 14. And when such article shall have become part of the Constitution of the United States, said state shall be entitled to representation in Congress. So you got a state with no representation in Congress. Is that equal footing with the original 13? But it's amending the Constitution, ratifying the 14th Amendment, and it says that you have to have a new Constitution composed of citizens loyal to Congress, and they are required to pass it, still don't get representation in Congress. It has to become part of the national Constitution, and then they can seat representatives in Congress. We've counted right at 15 constitutional violations in these acts. How many unconstitutional acts do you need? One. Well, what happened with the 14th Amendment? Thank you. Great staff here. Appreciate it. Andrew Johnson vetoed the Reconstruction Acts, and now he's considered the worst president we ever had. And in his veto of one of the Reconstruction Acts, he says this, and I want you to listen carefully to the words. And I want you to see if there's been a title transfer. Again, we talked about when we went under the crown, we were colonies, and then we became states. That was a title transfer. That's when the crown says, I recognize you as free sovereign states. Title transfer. Transfer of who has authority over those states. Andrew Johnson, in his veto of the Reconstruction Act, said this, another ground on which these Reconstruction Acts are attempted to be sustained is this, that these states are conquered territory. A title of conquest stands on clear ground. It's a new title acquired by war. It applies only to territory. And it goes on to say, we have not conquered these. The title of the states went to the United States. They created a new status called the United States citizen. That's a national citizenship. You're subject to Congress. But if we don't know what's going on, we look fondly and lovingly at the original Constitution, saying we've got all those rights of those state citizens. When you create an entity, who is greater, the creator or the created? The creator is greater. Congress created the United States citizenship status. Congress dictates what the rights of United States citizens are. Is there any evidence of that? Can we go gay marriage? Can we go parent school? Can we go Roe versus Wade? Can we go display of the Ten Commandments? The list goes on and on. Think what Samuel Adams says, you can have thousands hacking at the branches, which is what we as a Patriot community are doing because we don't know what the root is. And what we're here to do is show you the root of why we're here, how they got here, why they do what they do, why you can't get them to change. James G. Blaine was one of the senators in the United States Congress when they passed the 14th Amendment. Of course, he was for the 14th Amendment. He's one of the radical Republicans. And the radical Republicans were the bad guys, okay? And a speech he gave 1 month after the 14th Amendment was proposed by the United States Congress, he went back home to Maine. He was from Maine. And he was talking to his constituents about this. And he's going to sit there and put the 14th Amendment in these wonderful terms. Does Congress, do politicians have a way of putting terrible things into wonderful terms? Well, he says this, talking about the 14th Amendment and this U.S. citizenship status. And in making this extension of citizenship, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. We intend to make citizenship national. Is everybody getting this? And he went on in his autobiography. James G. Blaine wrote this. Remember, the war was about states' rights. But again, I want you to see how Congress does bait and switch. In the resolutions that passed Congress in 1861, they said the war was not prosecuted for any purpose of conquest or subjugation or to overthrow, interfere with the rights or established institutions of the states. James G. Blaine says this, as a vicious theory, what I forgot to say was, and at the end of that thing it says, it was to preserve state rights. It was to preserve the Union. Preserve state rights is what the original object of the war was. Because do you think they could have got the New York, Ohio farm boy to go to war to rid themselves of their state rights? No. So they said the war is not to overthrow state rights, it's to preserve state rights. Well, here it is, 8 years later, what's he saying? As the vicious theory of state rights have been constantly at enmity with the true spirit of nationality, the organic law of the Republic, which is the Constitution, should be so amended that no standing room for the heresy of state rights would be left. That's written in 1886. He goes on about the 14th Amendment. The first section of the Constitutional Amendment, which includes these invaluable provisions, is in fact a new charter of liberty to the citizens of the United States, is the utter destruction of the pestilent heresy of state rights, which constantly menace the prosperity and even the existence of the Republic, and is the formal bestowment of nationality. We were federal, now we're national, upon the wise federal system. Listen to this one. This is James G. Blaine in his autobiography, 20 Years of Congress, published in 1886. Talking about these new states. It says, all were ordained in the spirit of liberty, all prohibited the existence of any form of slavery, and all heartily recognized the supreme sovereignty of the national government as having been indisputably established by the overthrow of the rebellion which was undertaken to confirm the adverse theory of state rights. Anybody taught this in school? If you've got a problem, how can you fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is? We at America's Remedy back here in the back are there to educate, to talk to people, get a group together. We got NC Republic. The Reconstruction Act went to the United States Supreme Court. States were fighting it, saying this is unconstitutional. Georgia v. Stanton, the Supreme Court says just because they have an act of Congress that if put into act place would abolish and totally destroy the existing state government of Georgia is not within the jurisdiction of the court to make a ruling on the case. The Founding Fathers said the Supreme Court was supposed to be a bulwark between an overreaching Congress and the people. It failed. Finally, it got to the Supreme Court in a case called Ex parte McCardle. McCardle was imprisoned under the Reconstruction Acts. He got to the United States Supreme Court, argued in the Supreme Court for 5 days. The Reconstruction Acts were about to be declared unconstitutional. What happened? Had a congressman. They proposed legislation, passed legislation, and took away the Supreme Court's jurisdiction to make a ruling on the case. One of the few cases in our history that's ever happened on. And that's the last time it got to the Supreme Court. You can read any legal journal you want. We have revolution, restoration, stay the course. Revolution's out. Restoration and stay the course. We're about restoration. Let's restore the states that were put in abeyance. But it's going to take free, brave people. If we're afraid to be called a name, we don't need you. We're looking for the people who want to say, hey, our country's been destroyed. If I don't do something, I'm going to hand my children a mess. Whose duty is it to fix a problem when it's there? There's a couple acronyms. I got this off the wall of the place I stayed at last night. An acronym for fear. Forget evil and run. Uh-oh, I'm forgetting the other one. Face evil and rise up. Are we going to look evil in the face and say, you know what, life's a whole lot easier if I just go back home? Or are we going to say what Patrick Henry said? Our founding fathers said, they pledged their lives, fortune, sacred honor. We have people today say, well, they might call me a name. I can't do that. They'll say mean things to me. What are we, people? We can either go home and pretend this talk didn't happen and look at all these people that should be fixing it, all these other people, but who should be fixing it? We, the people. Not them, the government. This would be a great time to end. Thank you very much. How much time do I have? I don't even know.
1 minute.
A minute?
Yes.
If anybody has any more questions, this is a deep subject. I've got this much information. I gave you this much. I had to try to be as succinct as I could to give you something that's coherent you can wrap your mind around. There's a lot of details. There's probably a lot of questions you've got. I'm here to talk to people. We're at a Patriot Summit. I think a summit means leaders ought to come together and discuss what's going on in this country and what can we do about it. Let's bring some ideas together. But what we're about is rather than having all the people out there hacking at the branches, let's hack the root. Let's get this country back in the hands of the people. Let's quit begging usurpers and tyrants for our rights back. Let's start exercising your rights. That's right. Thank you, people.